Welcome back everyone to a bit of a sequel to my top 30 albums of all time. It's another 30 albums. I love every one of them. 10, 12 of them could easily have got into the original top 30. Only one rule for this particular one: I can't repeat any of the artists that were in the original 30. And also, when I'm talking about the various albums, I'm going to leave you one key track at the bottom of the screen for you to have a listen to on Spotify or iTunes or whatever it is you listen to, and they'll get you a good start to that particular album. First album is The Gang of Four, Entertainment, from 1979. I only saw this band the once, but that was absolutely unforgettable. Incredible group. Number two is Humans Lib by Howard Jones. He gets a lot of stick, doesn't he, old Howard, but I think he's really, really good. I've seen him a couple of times now as well. Humans Lib is easily his best album. It is his first one, but I don't think he's ever topped it. Next up is The Stranglers and the Black and White album. They've always produced good music, but I kind of went off them after Hugh Cornwell left. Black and White is easily their best for me. Includes the monster single Nice and Sleazy, which I don't think they've ever topped. Next one is Steve Vai, or Vai as he called himself and his band at the time for this particular album, Sex and Religion. Devin Townsend was the lead vocalist on this album, and I saw them on this tour at Newcastle City Hall, and they were incredible. Steve Vai's always been one of my favourite guitarists, and he didn't disappoint that night. Next up, The Skids and Days in Europa. Again, my favourite Skids album. I've chosen The Olympian as the track to listen to, but you could pick any one of 5 or 6 on here. It's just an incredible album. Number 6, and I don't care about the politics of this album whatsoever, but it's Paul Simon's Graceland, which I'm sure 99% of you will know and hopefully love, because we're going back to the 1970s, 1977, and again, this is one of my favourite guitarists. The group is Bebop Deluxe, the guitarist is Bill Nelson, and it's a live album, live in the air age. I played this to death back then, and I still play it a lot now. Next up, 1970, Black Sabbath, the Paranoid album. I could have picked any one of 3 or 4 albums from Black Sabbath's early days, but I've gone for Paranoid because I think it's the most consistent, and it's got War Pigs on it, and who doesn't love War Pigs? Next up, and my first album actually has been released since 2000. I counted these up earlier, and I've got 7 albums in the list from 2000 onwards. That surprised you, didn't it? Yeah, I'm not exactly stuck in the 70s, really. Anyway, it's Moby and the Destroyed album. Love Moby. I'm reverting to type a little bit for the next one. It's going back to my sort of new wave days, and it's Magazine and the album Real Life. Next up, from 1973, a classic album from Mike Oldfield, an obvious choice in a way, Tubular Bells. Tubular Bells Part 1 in particular has got everything. I lose interest a bit in Part 2, but it's still a great listen even now. Number 12 is a bit of a cheat, this one. It's a compilation album, and I wasn't going to include any compilations at all. But Neon, a group from Durham in the late 70s and early 80s, were a band I used to listen to a hell of a lot. My good mate Tim Jones is in the band, lead singer and guitarist, and they never released an album. A few singles, a John Peel session. So I've chosen the What album. It's a massive compilation of demos and live tracks. Those Peel sessions as well. Manic stuff, as you might expect from something from the late 70s. But give them a listen, they are incredible. British rock band Dare is my next choice. Out of the Silence from 1988. Group were fronted, and still are fronted, by Darren Wharton, who was a keyboard player in Thin Lizzy, and they're a great band, very underrated. I saw them twice back at it's been early 90s, I think I saw them at Newcastle Riverside both times. A little bit of trivia. Professor Brian Cox was on keyboards for these two albums that they did at that time. He left after that, I think. But yeah, that Brian Cox. Next up is Stephen Severin, the bass player from Susie and the Banshees. He's mainly into soundtracks these days, and this is one. It's from the German silent horror film Vampire. It's really good. I mean, it's stuff of nightmares to listen to, so don't listen to it on your own in a dark room or anything, because it really will disturb you. But it's cleverly done, and well, just give it a listen. Give a listen to the track that I've picked there. We saw Severin on the on a small tour he did, and I felt heartily sorry for him that night, because there was something like 10 or 11 people in the audience, including me and Alison. You just wanted to give him a hug, but still thoroughly enjoyed the experience after all that. Next up, the Buzzcocks from 1978. My favourite Buzzcocks album is Love Bites. Next up, from 1974, Barry White. Can't get enough. Pretty much love everything that Barry White's done, if I'm honest, including all the Love Unlimited Orchestra stuff. Next up is Glenn Campbell's album from 2011, Ghost on the Canvas. I probably haven't played an album as much in the last 15 years as this one. It's on reflection, I should have included this in my top 30. We're up to 18 now, and it's from 1992, and finally the appearance for Iron Maiden. Fear of the Dark is my choice. I find Iron Maiden incredibly frustrating, because as much as I love them, they've never released the perfect album for me yet. There always seems to be 4 or 5 fillers, lazy tracks really, that they haven't really given much thought to. I'm sure Iron Maiden fans will be leaping on my back listening to that. But Fear of the Dark is the closest for me to not the perfect Iron Maiden album, but their best in my opinion. 19, my favourite guitarist ever, Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac, and his solo album Seeds We Sow from 2011. Next up is Robert Plant and the Manic Nirvana album from 1990. Saw him live around about this time, a couple of times actually, and he was fantastic. He threw a little bit of Led Zeppelin in there as well. If you listen to Manic Nirvana, you will hear a couple of samples of Led Zeppelin tracks. Don't know why he did that actually, but doesn't detract from the album because it really is good. My next choice is Ludovico Einaudi and the Divenire album. Sorry Italians if I got that wrong. Einaudi, I could play him all day long and not get fed up at all. So many tracks to choose from on this album, but the whole thing is pretty perfect for Einaudi. 22 is Rush and A Farewell to Kings. Always like this band. Again, they're a bit like Iron Maiden. There's a few albums where I think those tracks don't really work at all, but as a three-piece group, they were incredible. The next choice is from 2015, and it's a brilliant synth album. It's a soundtrack album from the film Turbo Kid. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Chronicles of the Wasteland is the actual title of it, and it's by Lamatos. If you like synth music that sounds like it comes from the 1980s, you'll love this. I've gone back to 1975 for my next choice. It's 10cc and the original soundtrack. It has got the monster hit on it, I'm Not in Love, but the album is more than that track, and 10cc were incredibly good for those first 3 or 4 albums. Lost it a little bit after Godley and Cream left, but I'll always go back to the original soundtrack. It's a classic album. I picked another soundtrack for my next choice, John Carpenter, the soundtrack to The Fog from 1980. We're nearly done, I promise you. Next up is Cat Stevens and Tea for the Tillerman from 1970. It starts with Cat Stevens' voice for me, but his songwriting is also brilliant. I could have picked another couple of albums, but I've gone for Tea for the Tillerman. Next up, Punishment of Luxury, another band from my native northeast England, Laughing Academy. And from 2006, C6 Steve and Doghouse Music. He's fantastic entertainment, isn't he, C6 Steve? This is probably my most played album of his, although I love them all. Last but one choice is Pornography by The Cure. I like all aspects of this band, all eras, but this is the album I tend to go back to more than the others. My last choice is a buy one get one free effort. The Small Price of a Bicycle by the Icicle Works, and the Truth and Beauty album by Ian McNabb. McNabb, of course, is lead singer and guitarist in the Icicle Works. It's hard to separate the two albums. They are both fantastic. Ian McNabb, a brilliant songwriter. He's just released a Fleetwood Mac tribute album, if you're interested. That's worth checking out as well. And that pretty much wraps up my 30. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the list. Please leave lots of comments, thumbs up and all that stuff. The usual YouTube shenanigans. I've got another video in the pipeline. I'm going to go back to DVD and Blu-ray for that one. Let me know what your favourite albums are. I'm always interested to hear. And any suggestions for a future video as well. But that would be really appreciated. See you next time, and thanks again. That's gonna fucking help it.